Our Father, Atlanta West Side belongs to you, and we want you to use us to bring glory to your name, that your kingdom would be embodied in our life together and previewed from Buckhead to Bankhead. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. So I'm Walter. Y'all know that. Here's our agenda. If we can go to the next slide. No, do we have the agenda? It's a green slide. Disappeared somewhere. Okay, let me just tell you what it is. I'm going to go through some celebrations and challenges over the last year, including new building spaces, new officer candidates, new staff, new church plant. I'm going to have some comments about where we go from here. Then Megan Penland and Chris LaCroix are going to go through our budget, and then you've got time for questions. So I'm tired of hearing me talk, but we've got a little bit more of that. So celebrations, can we go to the first celebrations? Big one, new building spaces, woots, right? More than double the room, not only in the front of the building, but also next door. New officer candidates that we will put forward for election in a little bit less than a month. And we'll go into that. More staff and more that we need to hire, as well as new opportunities that require us to be as dependent on the Lord as ever. If we can go to the next slide. So about the new building, just a few highlights. Next slide. We've gone from 5 kids' rooms to, this is kind of not in the slide, to 0, which you guys remember that. That was nuts. To now 12 plus 2 new halls and meeting rooms for adults that we're already using this month. The student center, this is the immediately adjacent space, kind of a third of the building next to us. We've just gotten that completed in the last few weeks, and if you haven't popped over there, it's super cool. If I were a kid, I'd really want to be there. And then Sunday programming, in order to fill out this space, our staff has been working tirelessly. Lots of classes, groups, community meetings, space for, honestly, for more places where the community can use our building. This belongs to the Lord, not to Atlanta West Side. That is our desire. As well as co-working space. You may have heard us talk about this before. The key word here is upcoming. So we're not quite ready for that yet, but Monday through Thursday at least, we want to have the building open during regular office hours so you can come and enjoy the Wi-Fi and a comfortable place and do your work. So these celebrations also come with challenges. Double the space means, strangely, with all this new room, we actually already are limited in terms of the number of kids. We filled it out very quickly. Patty predicted that right at the very beginning. Also, as you've all experienced as well, parking is insane, and we've got to work on that. We also have liabilities now. We've got to keep people safe and secure. It's going to take a lot more work. We've got security training coming up in a couple of months, so that's part of it. The Student Center has some of the same challenges, being a little bit more distant from us, with lots of kids over there. We've also been trying to work out a way to share the space with another ministry, and that's kind of an ongoing discussion about whether that will go forward. Sunday programming, all these new opportunities require more work from staff, more volunteers, more lay leaders, and we still have limitations. And as I mentioned about co-working, we're not quite ready to be there, so please give us a minute. That's the new building. New officer candidates, if we can go to the next slide. October 22nd, as I mentioned, that'll be an election like this after church. First of all, we've got 3 candidates for elder. Stephen Owens, Norman Powell, and Bill McPhail. They were nominated by you, trained over the last year and a half, or 2-ish years, and are ready to stand for election. If you haven't seen it already, we're going to be sending out a link to sort of bios of these guys with questions about their lives. And I mean guys in the inclusive sense, because the deacon candidates, we've got 2 slides of deacon candidates here. Adam Eisenheimer, Angela Oliver, Cal Fisher, Michael Bragg, and Quinita and Weston. So they've also been trained alongside the elders, and the deacons are scheduled to be appointed actually on the same morning when we will have an election for the elders. So great to have new people bearing the load of leadership alongside of us, but this also includes challenges. Our existing officers have been working tirelessly for many years. We've got weighty responsibilities, lots of changes. That's hard. Elders, we've had 2 elders who moved away in the last year, Brooke Hab Tamariam and Nathan Rodeheaver, as well as 5 who are on sabbatical or kind of an extended reassignment. Similarly with the deacons, one of our deacons went to another church and 4 are currently on sabbatical. So we need all hands on deck. In addition to new lay leaders, we also have new staff in the last year. We'll go to these folks, Sarah, Elena, Robert, and Zach. You can see when they started. Elena is, the August 2023 date is a little deceiving. When did Elena start part-time? Maybe February, yes. Okay, and now she's full-time. Robert's part-time, and Zach as well, who led us in worship this morning. And Sarah stepped up from part-time to full-time as well. Also, just one lonely little slide for Bruce Terrell. Bruce is here. We're so thankful to have Bruce here. And he said he hates that picture, but I think he looks like young and kind of buff, right? Like it looks like he just came from the gym. I don't know. Bruce is just 3 weeks in and quick on the uptake, but a lot to carry already for him. And if you have questions for him after this, you're free to ask them as well. So among the blessings of all these new staff, we also have challenges. Grief and sadness, it's just, we've got to name it. Most of you know we lost Caitlin Johnson to a car accident in January, and then Patty and Noah and Uni leaving under different circumstances, but fun to have Patty here today. Also, John Gunter, who was in the executive director role up until November-ish of this past year, has been in kind of an extended transition, moving toward global missions, and he's been so great to kind of help us fill in gaps over the last few months that we haven't really finalized his role going forward, so we're working to do that as soon as possible. Everybody who's new has just hit the ground sprinting. If you know Elena, give her a hug or a beer or a gift card or something. She's got a lot of kids at her feet everywhere. Bruce as well. Also, you know, we talked about this as a staff last week, but the pattern in the Bible is when you do good ministry, people don't say, that was great ministry, we'll leave you alone now. Ministry actually begets more ministry. And so the more good things that are happening, the more good things there are to do. And on top of that, this last bullet here, church size changes. So our membership, if we get through everybody in our membership queue currently, we'll have over 800 members. That's adults and children. And if you're aware of this, there's some really typical size categories that churches move in. So it's like the vast majority of churches are under 100 people. The next is 200. The next is 400, and the next is 800. And pretty much anything over 800 is a very large church. And as churches, as we have gone through over the last 16 years, as you move through these different sizes, the way you operate as a church changes. The organizational dynamics change. And so if we continue to grow beyond this 800 mark, organizationally, culturally, this is going to require new skills, new patterns, and of course, more staff. We don't know if that will happen. We're not trying to make it happen. We're just wanting to be faithful with what the Lord has given us. So future hires related to that. We've got at least 2 specifics and 2 kind of broad. Student Boys Coordinator, we're interviewing candidates for that now. Kids Director, we have a job description and we're about to start searching for that. Working on who will fill the next pastor role in the church, as well as probably at least one, if not multiple, administrative roles that we've got to figure out. And by we, I mean Bruce. So, in addition to that, we haven't talked enough about this. This is really something to celebrate, but some of you know, since January of 2021, Stephen Gilchrist was on staff with our church. He was on salary up until this past July And now he and his family have officially moved down I-85 to Fairburn and are preparing to plant Jubilee Fellowship Church, hopefully launching at Easter of next year. And yeah, that's something to celebrate, right? So if you see the web address there, jubileefellowshipatl.com, and you can go on there. There's a little, of course, a button where you can click to sign up for his updates, to pray for them, and of course, like all church plants, they need funds as well. The church has committed significant funds to them, but they also need to raise additional money as well. So next slide. Here's where do we go from here? Let me give you my first answer kind of based on the sermon this morning. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to be on this side of the dirt tomorrow, right? None of us knows the future, right? And yet, what are we seeking to do in the future? And the main thing I've been saying for a couple of years now is we want to be the healthiest church we possibly can be in every sense that the Bible gives us. That's sort of the biggest, kind of broadest way to talk about our church. Another way to talk about it is we want to be good stewards of the resources that God has given us, starting with people, but as well as the facilities and the funds that we have to steward as well. And then, where was the third thing I was going to say? Yes, whatever it looks like, whatever our church looks like in the future, we want to be Atlanta West Side in a way that's consistent with who we have been. And one way to say that is we want to keep practicing our core values. So if we can go to the next slide, we have these 5 core values, and if you look at the first words, many of you know this, they spell out the acronym PEACE. That's just an easy way to remember it. Regardless of how big we get, regardless of how much space we have, or how many programs we have, all of our programming, all of our preaching, all of our worship is going to be driving down to transformation at the heart level, the interior, real you. Not because we're just all into counseling and therapy, but because we believe that's how real transformation happens from the inside out. That's where God changes us. So everything we do, we want to continue prizing the heart. We also want to embody grace. And the line I put under there is church culture preaches loudest. In other words, whoever's up here in the pulpit or leading musically can say grace, 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 grace until they're blue in the face. But what helps people to really grasp what the gospel of grace means, they experience that in community, in relationships, in the culture of our church. And so as we grow, as we get more structured, as we think about all of the different staff and so forth, we want to constantly give attention to what's the message of our culture? What do we smell like? Do we smell like Jesus, or do we smell like a really polished, organized group of people, right? We want to smell like Jesus. The third core value, aim for restoration, is probably the one that if you ask your average member at Westside, what does that mean? They go, oh, I don't know, right? Because it's not immediately obvious. It's a phrase from 2 Corinthians chapter 13. And what we connect it to especially is what we've called here redemptive unity or redemptive ethnic unity. This idea of breaking down barriers between people along the lines of race, class, and culture, and socioeconomic divisions. And this has been the most humbling challenge of my adult life, to try to continue growing our church in that way. And yet we need to continue doing that, fighting for that as much as possible. It's still in the Bible. It's not a 21st century invention. This is where all of history is going. We want to taste the kingdom of God as much as we can in this place. And it's worth noting that just saying out loud, the losses to our staff in recent years have also been losses to in diversity, in non-white persons. And that's also a big priority as we think about hires in the coming year and beyond. So redemptive unity now more than ever. 2 more, cultivate place. This is the one that's probably changed more than anything else over the 16 years we've been a church. I've told this story before, but years ago we interviewed somebody for membership, and they said, well, we're coming from this church nearby. And I said, oh, how did you find that church? They're like, well, we came here and you told us to go there. And because we were so intensely local, focusing on the west side, that we really didn't want to draw people from farther than about a 2 or 3 mile radius. The larger we've gotten, the bigger our footprint has become, and we've come to accept that. It's not something we can control. However, this value that we cultivate place, I'll put it this way, even though our church enables us to have this sort of regional reach, it does not enable us to rewrite the laws of physics. And what I mean by the laws of physics are that proximity still matter. Living your life, how long it takes you to get to other people, to live life in proximity with one another, it still has a huge effect on how you live your life. So we have this regional capacity, and we're embracing that, and yet we still want to cultivate this regional focus on the west side, encouraging people to live, work, play, worship, and serve here as much as possible. And then last, embrace limitations. This is a core value that I think is often misunderstood because it kind of sounds like we're not going to try too hard, right? That's kind of the gist of it. Well, what you think is, and the reason I put this line in here, it's about maximizing our actual resources. Embracing limitations just means recognizing that the God that gave all of us as human beings limitations. We've got so many resources here, but we don't have all the resources. And we want to be good stewards of what we have been given. We want to maximize those for the good of our neighbors, for the glory of God. So there'll be things that we'll decide, you know what, we just can't do that right now. Like, just as a simple example, like co-working. Like, our staff is just not ready to let everybody swarm into the building on the weekdays. But as soon as we are, that's what we want to do. So that's how I would talk about where we're going as a church. And if you have questions about that, you can ask that to me. But now it's the time for the true jewel of the meeting. We're going to talk about numbers. Yes. And this is Megan Penland, who is our chief administrator, and Chris LaCroix, who's one of our deacons on the finance team.
Good afternoon. Yes, as Walter said, I'm Megan Penland on staff here, and I have really the great privilege of working closely with our finance team. I will just take this moment before we get into the budget overview to actually recognize the people who serve on that team. It's an incredible mix of elders, deacons, staff, and lay leaders that is currently co-chaired by Chris LaCroix, who is here this morning with me, and Lauren Johnson, who's not able to be here, but she knows everything about every dollar that comes in and out of this place, and we are very grateful for the work they do. Working with Chris and Lauren are May Barnes, Sarah Grizzle, Bill Holby, Taylor Burns, Tyler Jeffries, Joel Kimmel, and Mike Meyer. And those people meet monthly and examine with a very fine-tooth comb the state of our financials. So let's move into just an overview of fiscal year 24. And actually, before we get to fiscal year 24, I'll give a recap of where we landed with fiscal year 23. So the fiscal year here runs August 1st through July 31st. And we are just really pleased to be able to report a year of the Lord's great faithfulness to our church. We ended the year over budget with our giving at $3.2 million, and that was 2% higher than we had forecasted going into the year. In addition, and that was just to our general giving, our unrestricted fund. So in addition to those gifts, we ran a $1.8 million capital campaign. That capital campaign and our existing facilities reserved allowed us to invest significantly on this property here and the property next door, as Walter mentioned earlier, just how we're able to fully utilize that space. So that's just been a tremendous gift, and I'll mention that we did that without taking on additional debt, and that's very significant. As we look to fiscal year 24, so we're projecting a 20% increase in both income and expenses as we're aiming for a balanced budget. So that's one of the largest budgets that it is by far the largest budget year that we have had as a church. And that was actually a fairly conservative approach to forecasting our budget. If we can move to the next slide. So this is just kind of a year-by-year picture of where our annual budget has landed. This is what we're projecting for our income. So this is tracking what we are hoping for in gifts to general giving, to that unrestricted fund. So for fiscal year 24, we took a conservative approach in forecasting this for the fall. We're just anticipating 3% increase each month in the fall, and that number was driven by reflecting on our income over the last 6 months, and then just adding the percentage increase. We, again, are expecting a December spike in giving. That's historically been true for our church. We see an increase in gifts in December. That reflects what a number of other churches and nonprofit organizations see. And then as we forecast for the spring, it's a bit more aggressive. We're looking at 10% growth in our income there, with the hope being that as we fully realize some of our programming, we have been seeing growth trajectory just in our attendance, that will also be realized in our general giving. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Chris then to present what our budget for fiscal year 24 looks like.
Great, thank you. So yeah, as you can see here, again, that green bar represents what Megan just shared, 3.9 in tithes and offerings, which we refer to as our income. And then our budget here is broken down into some of the key categories, and you can see again that about 20% increase, and the majority of that growth is coming in staff. So staff's growing about 10%, and then we've also budgeted more for giving into some of the various ministries and partners that we support. So kind of the main drivers of that growth. And then you can go to the next slide. And then just to kind of, this is something we keep a close eye on as well, just to understand, hey, how is the financial health of the church? And so this is our, we keep dollars in reserves just as kind of an emergency rainy day fund. And so you can see where we have been, our operating reserves. We try to target to keep our operating reserves at about 3 months of operating costs. So if income just totally dried up, we could basically fund church operations for 3 months beyond that. And that's what that 970 number represents. So that's where we're projected to be at by the end of the month. We started the fiscal year a little bit higher, but that was also, the majority of that difference has been spent on a lot of the fixtures and furniture that you see around church now. And then we keep a facilities reserve as well, just for any, again, unknown, unprojected issues with the building. But yeah, other than that though, all of our, basically every dollar in is allocated to a dollar going out. So it's really, just we have to continuously just, exercise faith in the Lord's provisions in the form of giving to be able to, continue to fund our operations and all of the growth that we are excited about. And then the last thing here, this is just our the debt that we have on the books that has funded the building. We're actually in a really good spot with that loan. I know interest rates are scary these days, but we refinanced that loan in, I think, 2021, and we're locked in around, I think it's about a 4% interest rate for the next 10 years. So we're in a good spot from a debt perspective. So not a lot of risk there. And with that, I think we are on to questions.
We're at, you guys are doing great. We're at 24 minutes and we've got time for questions. We are definitely not going to go till 1:30. We've got some microphones. Do we have some microphones we can pass around? Or actually, maybe we don't. It would help for let's pass one of those around. Help for the live stream. If you have a question, just raise your hands and Zach will get it to you and we'll answer what we can. All great questions start with awkward silence. Man, nothing? Oh, thank you, Sarah.
With the building expansion, did you increase the size of the facility reserves to address the larger footprint?
That's a great question. Do you know? I don't think we did. Yeah.
I can answer it with a little bit more color. No, we did not increase the size of the facilities. Give me the microphone. For this year, for a very specific reason, actually, because the work that's been done on any new space is under warranty by our construction contractor for 1 year. So hopefully that will be repaired within that. If there's something in addition to that, our hope is that the $200K would be sufficient.
You just saw a live action replay of what the finance committee basically does when we get questions. That's my email every day.
Are there other capital improvement plans like the rest of the building that we did the youth center in that are like imminent or in the works, or is it kind of like on pause?
So let me make sure I heard you correctly. Are there other capital plans like the building next door, which we're leasing currently?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like in terms of, I know we did the youth center, and there was a question about what to do with the rest of the space. Like, is there a plan for that, or is there nothing like imminent?
Great question. One of you guys want to hit it, or do we want to bring Bruce up for?
That feels unfair to Bruce. There are not concrete plans yet. There's just a lot of opportunity around that additional space. So the concrete plan is actually been realized in this last week, which was to get our student center space tidied up. I mean, the space we have was great and available to us was great in layout, but lacked in form. And so the students poured a lot of work into that over the summer. That space is like up and running. And then there's opportunity with that building that we're leasing. So we don't know what we'll do with that yet. We're just kind of waiting to see where the Lord is directing us there. But there's no like actual concrete plan for the building beyond opening the student center.
We do have the ability to sublease it, but only certain uses are really possible for that. And our lease that we've got, I guess it's one lease now, right? For the two spaces next door that we have. Our lease includes an option to buy the whole building that maybe expires at the end of the year, but could be renegotiated. So that is a possibility if more growth happens and it becomes clear that we really need that building. It's possible that we could go try to raise the money to buy that building at some point in the future as well. Ken A.
I got to ask. The church talks a lot about diversity. And while you can't force diverse people to come, there certainly are things that can be done to attract diversity. And I was just wondering what kind of conversations, what kind of plans do you do to attract a diverse audience, other than trying to hire one or two diverse staff people to what look to be to increase your numbers and not really impact in 30318 the diverse community that's here. So tell me what you've got in mind, tell me what you thought about, what can be done.
Yeah, great question, Kenny. And a hard one and a humbling one. And if any other elders or staff want to speak to this, I'd be glad to hear what you say too. In 16 years as a church, and you've been around for a lot of those, like you said, we've talked about it a lot, and just talking about it doesn't make it happen. The top priority in my mind is not that majority white people make decisions that attract non-white people, but that non-white people are at the table making decisions about what the church does. This is why staff is important. This is why lay leaders are important. So, we're making incremental progress in that, but it's not just about representation in the sense of like, hey, look, we have non-white people on staff, so we're not racist. It's more like we have non-white people on staff that are part of shaping who we are as a church all the way through. So that's always been my first thought. I mean, a second thought that I think is just worth naming. I mean, I said it in the sermon today. Like, part of I think why we're where we are is our senior pastor is super duper white, right? And even just and this is not to excuse myself, but kind of culturally where I come from, where I draw my illustrations and my experience, often tends to reinforce or reach people who look like me, and that's a liability. So I think there's growth in me that I want to happen to reach out. Like, so for example, there's a group that we've been connected with for a number of years called One Race, and One Race has pastors getting together in these reconciler groups across racial lines to learn from each other. So I've got a reconciler group with Black, white, Hispanic pastors, men and women, starting in the next few weeks for the next year, as a way to help me grow in some of those areas. Additional issues, like obviously worship music is a big kind of cultural dividing line in terms of racial diversity, and we've made deliberate decisions over the years to try to kind of find maybe more of a middle space in terms of culturally where we land, but I think there's lots of room clearly for us to move more in a way that would attract people outside of this majority white context. So worship is always on the table and how we do it. I don't know. That's off the top of my head. Any other leaders, elders, or worship leaders, or my wife? Anybody want to add anything to that? And honestly, Kenny, part of the answer is, if there's something that really moves the needle, I might just not even know what it is yet. We might not even know what it is yet. But I'll say it's a daily prayer for me, that the Lord will make us look more like our neighborhood, more like the kingdom of God, some way, somehow, whatever He has to do. And I might be a really old man before I taste it, but I'm not going to give up, and our leaders are not going to give up either. Anything to add, anybody? That's what I got for now. Other questions? Yes, Aaron.
This is sort of a follow-up question to that. Two of the positions that we will be hiring for are the Director of Children's Ministry and Assistant Pastor, correct? Can you just explain for those of us who are a little bit newer how those positions will be filled? Will there be a search committee? Will it be filled by staff in consultation with the elders? Just wondered how that would work.
Mm-hmm. So pastors will always put together a search committee, and we haven't even got a job description yet, so that committee hasn't been done yet. How are we going about the children's ministry director?
Yeah, children's ministry director, it will be a decision, or there'll be a recommendation by a committee to make that hire. So right now that position is posted, and we're recruiting applicants, and then also mobilizing the committee who will then vet applicants and make a recommendation for hire.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question, Aaron? More or less? Mm-hmm.
I do have a quick follow-up question from hers about the committees you put together. Are they typically of lay people, or is it elders? Because I don't know either who makes up the committee.
Pastoral search committees have been, they've sometimes included elders or deacons, but there's no requirement that they have a certain number of officers. Like the last two pastoral search committees were led by Hannah Heck, and she's not in one of those offices right now. So, lay people.
With regard to those search committees, there's less requirement in what position you may or may not hold, but what kind of role or representation you provide for the body. So if we're hiring for this is a great example for Westside Kids. We're going to have people who are really representative of our children's ministry, either volunteer in it or a parent in it, who have a broad understanding of the ministry needs. And that committee may very well look different from those who are serving on an assistant pastor search committee, which would be more representative of like the entire church body.
Great answer, yeah.
That's helpful, thank you. And then another question regarding the church size. You said once we get to this 800 threshold that some new patterns would need to develop. And so I was wondering if you could speak more to what you mean by that, like communication with staff or what those new patterns would look like.
Yeah, I mean, the threshold does not like suddenly trigger massive changes. It's more of a marker of where we are as the size of a church. So like 400 to 800 is a typical size of like a large church. That's where we are now. And the larger a church gets, one of the phenomena is staff members become more specialists than generalists. Another phenomena is that pastors have to be, some guy, and Tim Keller, I think is his name, says that pastors have to be not as much direct shepherds as ranchers, which, remember the first time I read that, I was like, ugh, I don't want to do that. But it just means you have to more manage other people that are doing hands-on shepherding work as well. So there's the tendency toward greater specialization is there. I mean, another reality is, like, let's say if you go from a church of like 100 to 200, you might have one pastor and then two pastors. And so you think to yourself, well, you need one pastor for every 100 people. And actually, like, the larger churches get, it doesn't just scale up in a linear way with pastors and other staff. Because the complexity goes up, you often need even more staff with even just 100 more people or 200 more people than you would before that. So specialization, complexity, this feels like a Bruce Terrell question. I don't know why I'm talking about this. Would you add anything to that, Bruce? How decisions are made, just to repeat that for the live stream, and we've been kind of working this transition for a long time where our elders, for example, are very hands-on, relationally involved in ministry, just like our deacons, and yet increasingly, just because of the size and complexity of the church, they've had to entrust more decisions to the staff, and the larger you get, the more that kind of shift ends up happening. And maybe one other one just to name is like that I feel, I meant to say this earlier, but when we first started, I didn't want the church to get more than 200 people. I thought, that's as many people as I can know, that's a lot anyway. And part of what I feared was that if we got bigger than that manageable size, that it would get less relational, that we would all be sort of insulated from each other by all these layers of bureaucracy and programming. And what I've been actually surprised to find is that this church feels more relational for me than ever, because people are not just numbers, they're people. Everybody's got a story, right? And the extent to which we know one another, there's just more humanity, more history, more stuff going on in people's lives. And so personally, I feel as invested in the lives of people as I possibly can, at the same time that just there's only one of me. And so my role in terms of my access that people have to me, the larger we've gotten, the less accessible I can be without burning out. So that's another change as well. Yes, Kate over here. Can we just pass it? Oh no, Laura first, sorry.
Thank you. So as we keep growing, is there any conversation about planning a church and sending a big chunk of us somewhere?
So the only church planning conversation that's live right now is how do we help Stephen Gilchrist get Jubilee Fellowship off the ground in Fairburn. And we have a a temporary session with Bill Holby, Byron Johnson, and Najib Hermez that are helping him to do that. We have, as you know, we've, maybe before your time as well, we've had multiple kind of false starts in wanting to plant churches early on. And so we're a little bit like, or at least I'll say, I'm a little bit gun shy. I still believe in church planting and would love to be a part of it. But we don't have any other live plans right now. One other thing that's conventional wisdom, and actually, Bruce, see if you confirm this or not, is that church planting is typically not a effective strategy for dealing with growth. Because if you say, you send 100 people out the door, statistically, 100 more people show up within the next 6 months. So it doesn't necessarily, yes, I get a thumbs up from Bruce. It doesn't necessarily cap the size of the church. I mean, the best part about it is it's just good for the kingdom, right? And that's the main reason to do it. But it wouldn't necessarily change who we are as a church long term. Yeah. Chip? Oh, wait, no, we missed Kate, sorry. Go with Chip because you're there, and then we'll come back to Kate.
All right. So it's exciting. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, a lot of growth, and constraints that you've mentioned. One of the main ones being leadership, right? There's a bottleneck. There's a bottleneck even for doing membership interviews. There's people are burning out, but there's also a growing pool of people who may want to get involved and can't because there's a wait for everything. In terms of the church having to rethink things, strip things down to the studs and rebuild, has that been a conversation, still keeping in mind doing due diligence so you're careful with who you bring up, but there's that big tension. There's a lot of people that want to get involved and do stuff but can't because the people who have to screen them are too burned out to do it. And
yes, great question, and the short answer is yes. We've been having multiple conversations with the staff and the session, the elders of the church, and it is a top priority, and Bruce especially is working to help us move that needle. So it's driving me crazy. We got to get through this bottleneck one way or another and get to a healthy pace where if you want to be a part of the church, you can fill out your information, attend Westside 101, get interviewed, and jump in with both feet. So very much a high priority right now. Yeah, Kate over here. Wait, Zach.
She's been raising.
All right, we're going to keep bumping you, Kate, but we're not going to forget. Joy? Okay, yeah.
I wondered, have we explored recycling infrastructure for the church? Do we know if that's something that could fit into our budget? To me, it seems important for us as stewards of God's kingdom, so that's why I wanted to ask.
And also, Bruce, who's your favorite nephew?
He's explicitly told us that it's not Nathan. The recycling has been explored, but not in recent years. So in the juncture that it was initially explored, it was cost prohibitive, which is an unfortunate place to be in. Not that it can't be reconsidered, and probably should be.
Okay, now we get to Kate.
Finally. No, I'm just kidding. So Chip kind of covered the bulk of my question, but I was wondering more specifically the plan for caring for the current elders and deacons and all the many staff who have been working tirelessly this past year, the plan for caring for all our leaders, but also just plan for follow-up to things like the leadership programming like we had in the spring, and I know they have every year, just like what the usual or typical plan or future plans are for those steps.
Well, the plan is to do better in general, or to come up with plans. I mean, we're down people, and maybe back to just the core value of embracing limitations. There's also a sense of like we can only do as much at a time as the Lord has provided for us to do. So I think in some ways we're not making as much progress right now in that as we want to. I don't know. And Bruce, how do we answer that? It's a great question. I mean, as you know, in general, my disposition is that the church is a body, right? This is the biblical model. And it takes leadership to have a healthy body, but it also takes every other body part from knuckles to knees. And so maybe this is a time where all of you who are members are thinking, yeah, I see a gap insofar as I have any extra time, energy, skills, passions, even just prayers, you know? I mean, we've always wanted to be a church that is marked by prayer. So the extent to which the whole body can be activated at a time like this, we need everybody, because we're sucking wind. Yeah. Yes, Bruce. Great. Great. So that guy, Bruce, would love to talk more about that. And I'm going to get on a plane to Utah. So, but seriously important question. So thank you. Do we have enough?
If I could,
Matt.
Yeah, if I could follow up with Kate's question, just to say, Walter put it very well. I feel like part of the question is asking the people who are already kind of overworked and burned out, what are you doing to help the people that are overworked and burned out? So in that sense, I think it does fall to us who are not on staff and not even elders maybe to look at those gaps and see where we can help with that and be a part of that.
And maybe to be a little bit more specific, when somebody is going through, let's say, a grief or some kind of challenge in life, like our natural thing that we say to people like that is say, hey, if there's anything I can do, let me know. And if you've ever been on the other side of that, part of the problem with that is it's like it puts the burden on you to figure out what you need. And so, but the extent to which you can say, hey, can I cook you a meal on Tuesday? And offer something that you know you can give, something specific, often that is much more fruitful. So the extent to which, we've had some people just say, hey, we feel like Atlanta Westside needs more prayer right now. We're just going to gather at a certain time on a certain day and pray for whoever wants to pray. There's a tendency when churches get bigger to think that everything that happens under the roof has to be sort of approved by the official channels or whatever. But this building belongs to the Lord and the body, and the extent to which we can use it to grow ministry from the ground up, that's still very much what we're about. So.
Maybe one, I imagine, solution that has recently kind of happened to help with this is, I know I got an email about shepherding model updates, and I know I got an email, but could you give context and like extra clarity maybe on just the transition of that model a little bit?
I'm wondering if we have a member of our care team that could do a better job walking through it. Sorry, care team not here today. Watching online, I'm sure. No, Virginia?
I'm not planning on answering any
Virginia's
questions.
a deacon, but,
Just asking questions.
So we had, for a number of years, the idea was that every elder had a shepherding group, which is a certain number of the members of the congregation that they were keeping track of and seeking to pray for and care for as well as they can. And as the church grew, some of these elders, their lists got to be like 60, 70 people long, and it's just like, this is not working. And so the current shepherding plan that's really relatively new is working through leaders, especially community group leaders and grace group leaders that are meeting every couple of months, is it? So where the elders come and meet with those community group leaders, grace group leaders, go through the membership list and say, okay, who who's AWOL, who's struggling, who needs some extra care. And so it's using the current structures that we have to coordinate care and shepherding from the elders. It's brand new, so we're still kind of figuring out how to do it. But like Ashley Meyer, if you know Ashley, is part of that team. Who else is on the care team? I'm trying to remember. Valeria McPhail.
It's chaired by Peter Pettit.
Peter Pettit. Yeah.
Lance Walker.
Rick Walker, yeah. So we've just really started that in the last month. So yes, Virginia.
I think that makes it my turn now. Back to the idea of involvement, and like, I recognize that there are areas where there are bottlenecks, particularly for folks that are trying to come into membership and leadership, but I wondered if you could talk a little bit about some of the volunteer opportunities that are open, where there's a relatively low barrier to entry, where, like, if folks want to get involved right now, they could.
Would you hand the microphone to the person to your right?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, show up and welcome. I mean, I think that is welcome team. You can make coffee,
Nursery,
West Side Kids, hold babies. Parking is definitely a need. Those are, first and foremost, just a great way to meet people and build community by volunteering and being here on Sunday mornings and stepping in. It's a huge way. And I think, Walter, your question to him was around a bottleneck of membership, right? But there's definitely not a bottleneck around serving and being here and finding ways to be a part.
So Jen is our director of discipleship. Joe, our pastor of families, anything to add in terms of needs?
I think Jenna covered most of it just in general, but there are all kinds of entry-level things you can do, from once a month to twice a month to every single Sunday. So you just need to come and talk to us about it. So, but there's a litany of things that could really be helpful that we would love to talk to you about. So,
and you know, like, we've got little cards on the pegboard. We've got QR codes all over the building on the TVs. We've got the app. There's a ton of different ways to find those opportunities. But like, if you're just, when in doubt, like any email that you've ever gotten from Westside, just reply to it. Say, I'm trying to help, and they'll get that to the appropriate people that can connect you to a need. Yes, Alex.
So this is kind of a church-related question, but also like church in Atlanta, where I guess like we came from the Midwest, and one thing I feel like that's more common is I feel like people in Atlanta are very busy. Like, how as a church are we like cultivating culture of like the importance of church and the importance of like church events and things like that? Because I feel like sometimes it could be really hard with like we try like with grace groups and all these, and sometimes like there's just it could be flaky, like who's there on like certain weeks. Like, how can we, like, I don't know, as a church, or I guess even as members and stuff like that, how can we continue to cultivate a culture of like being present? And I guess
that's an easy question. I mean, this could be a long discussion. It's a great question, Alex. I mean, I'll just throw out one angle that might be fruitful. We all are busy, and very often we think about our church involvement in terms of, you know, am I getting anything out of worship or grace group or community group or whatever? And we base our decisions on how our involvement based on what it's doing for us. It's just the default consumer mentality of our world. But the extent to which we can challenge people to think about, my presence actually matters to other people. When I don't show up because my life is busy or whatever, I'm actually depriving somebody else of my presence and the gift of me in their life. And that's just a single angle that might be fruitful, rather than just being like, why are you so flaky? Show up, dude. You know, hey, we're actually poorer when you're not here. Any others? Going once. All right. Thank you all for showing up and asking great questions. I hope those of you who are joining online benefited from this as well. Why don't we close in prayer? And since you're standing here, who's got the mic? Megan? You knew I was going to do that, right? All right. It can be quick.
Yes. Father, we thank you for just your provision for this church, the way that you care for each of us individually, collectively, and know that we are here really just for your kingdom, Lord, that we want to honor and glorify you in the work that we do as attenders, as members, as staff, that this is your place, Father, and that you will continually remind us of that and just provide us with wisdom, guidance, and direction as we move forward just to reach this world for your kingdom. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you all. And some of us will be sticking around if you have further follow-up questions as well.